welcome to the
I watched the Russian.
my opinion, one of the Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Brussels Signal Horizon podcast. I'm extremely pleased that today I will be talking to Professor Dr. Werner Patzelt, Professor at the University of Dresden and the Research Director at the MCC Brussels. Now, the timing could not be better, Professor Patzelt. I think you just recently published a book, for now only in German, but I'm looking forward to the English translation. And I think roughly translated, the title would be Germany's Blue Surprise, the AfD and populism, and blue is of course also the party the color of the AfD. And over the last couple of days, the so-called firewall between the establishment parties and the AfD, some say there are cracks in the firewall, some says it's not as much as people think it is. We had now former Chancellor Angela Merkel heavily criticizing her successor Friedrich Merz for voting together with the AfD for new laws in the area of migration. So if you just maybe take us a little bit, just for a few minutes, what's the history of the AfD? Because I recently watched CNN and a commentator there said they have not disowned their Nazi heritage. So is the AfD the successor party to the National Socialists, or is that an exaggeration or maybe even entirely wrong?
This is a wrong story about the AfD came into being. The AfD came into being when the Eurozone faced the first challenges because there was not budget discipline in different member states of the Eurozone, and the AfD emerged out of a movement criticizing the policies within the Eurozone. Originally, people from the FDP, the Liberal German Party, brought forward this criticism, which was rejected, of course, by Angela Merkel and a broad section of the German public. And these people who were not satisfied with the Eurozone policies founded a political action movement, which later was transformed into the AfD. Since the AfD, with this criticism of the Eurozone, were labeled in Germany as anti-European, the follow-up argument sounded as follows. Who is anti-European in Germany? Well, these are nationalists. Who are nationalists in Germany? Well, those are the successors of the Nazi Party. Therefore, the AfD, by its very criticism of the policies in the Eurozone, shows itself to be a fascist, racist, anti-European, nationalist, chauvinist party. And since in all German talk shows at this time, 10 years ago, something like 10, 11 years ago, the AfD was labeled in this way. Many people in Germany who were really right-wing persons now got the impression, well, after this NPD, National Democratic Party, which had really boring and not acceptable figureheads, after this NPD, we right-wing Germans now finally have a political party led by university professors, outstanding intellectuals, successful businessmen. This is our party. And here a process started in which the AfD won more and more of its membership out of the ranks of right-wing Germans, and within party struggles, the moderates, the liberals from the origins of the AfD, more and more got expelled of their offices at the beginning and then out of the party. So over the course of time, the membership of the AfD has significantly changed. Out of the now something like 50,000 members of the AfD, only some 7,000 have survived from the early years. The mass of the party members are clearly right-wing people, but of course there is still a strong part of former Christian Democrats who really have the vision of the AfD not being a right-wing party, but being, to put it in this way, that old Christian Democratic Union which under Angela Merkel ended to exist. So the impression that the AfD is a follow-up party of the Nazi movement is completely wrong. But the kernel of the truth in this observation is that the AfD over the years attracted more and more clearly right-wing people. And if you do not look at the party manifestos of the AfD, which are quite moderate, but look at what AfD members say in the internet or comment in internet communication, then you find a lot of authentic right-wing radicalism and some positions which are clearly Nazi positions.
I recently watched two interviews with Alice Weidel, the chancellor or the candidate for chancellor of the AfD. One was with Bloomberg, and I remember the interviewer said, well, Miss Weidel, you are the leader of the far-right AfD party in Germany. And she said, let me stop you right there. The AfD is a conservative libertarian party. And she repeated that statement in her conversation with Elon Musk. Now, if you would be on a table, if you would sit across Alice Weidel and she would say to you, Dr. Patzelt, please keep in mind the AfD is a conservative libertarian party. What would you say to that? Would you agree with her, or would you be more critical of that self-description of the party by its current leader?
Well, I would say, Alice, right you are. If we look in your party manifesto and in the evolution of your party manifestos, you are a liberal party. But if you look at the members that have joined the AfD during the last 6, 7, 8 years, if you look at the intra-party battles which have been lost by those who wanted to be a, center-right party and who have always lost against those party leaders who wanted a more right-wing party, then you have to admit that the reality of the party is much more the reality of a right-wing party than of a market liberal conservative party. I would not doubt, nevertheless, this I would add, that those in your party who feel themselves to be conservatives are really suffering from this political or cultural hegemonial position of the right-wingers in your party. And I would be happy for you, not so happy for the Christian Democratic Union as the most important rival party of AfD. I would be happy for your party if the true conservatives could win the next intra-party battles. And Alice, that's your job to make them win and no longer lose.
I think one aspect we have to look at is the year 2015. You mentioned the emergence of the AfD as a party that focused mainly on economic issues in the beginning. I think that the first leader was Bernd Lucke, who was an economist. And as you also mentioned, it was the Euro crisis that really triggered the emergence of the AfD. And I think also, correct me if I'm wrong here, I think also the name came from when Ms. Merkel said there is no alternative to the Euro. The reaction was to found a party that called itself the Alternative für Deutschland, the alternative for Germany. But that was mainly aimed at an economic topic. Now, in 2015, we have Angela Merkel's decision to open up the borders. This is when mass migration really ticks up, particularly in Germany. And that appears to give yet both an additional topic, but also a boost to the AfD. Maybe you can tell us a little bit what impact did 2015 have on the AfD from then up until now?
Well, we need to start this story a little earlier, namely in the October-November of 2014. In 2014, in the late fall of 2014, a movement started in Germany and became quite not popular, but had a lot of resonance throughout Germany. This was Pegida, which is in English the Patriotic Europeans Against the Islamization of the Occident.
That's a typical German, a very German title, very, very long. Like it could not just be something very, very, very short and quick. It had to be very long.
Yeah, sure, because Pegida are simply the initials of patriotic Europeans and so on. So Pegida was the short word which has been used and still is used since that time. This movement started with only, 200-300 persons in late October, and in January there were 25,000 demonstrators in the streets of Dresden. And the central topic of these demonstrations was, we get too many immigrants to Germany, and we get too many immigrants from Muslim countries to Germany. And this transforms our political culture. The reaction in Germany from all political parties, from the mass, the churches, from the media and your churches was, this is a racist movement which has no foundation in reality with the concerns they are bringing forward. And we have to fight this movement with all possible means. There was one party which understood that these demonstrations were not only driven by prejudices or wrong perceptions of reality, but they found something which is really wrong in the development of German immigration history or the trends towards a multicultural society. So a Unitarian front opened against Pegida and the AfD, who quite suddenly, not suddenly, but quite shortly after the origins of Pegida, sided with Pegida. And over the course of time, over the year 2015, Pegida became what the AfD is in the parliament, or became to be in the parliament. Pegida is, so to speak, the popularistic form, or has been the popularistic form of the AfD. So this movement started already in 2014. So when we had the big immigration wave of 2015, with all these, events in New Year's Eve of 2016 in Cologne with sexual harassments done by people from Northern Africa. When we have these events, the German public was sensitized for these things, and there was one party who always had been quite clear and open about this point: immigration does damage to Germany. And at this time, the German government, Angela Merkel, and all the German parties and all the German leading media said, there is no chance to stop immigration to Germany. It's simply not possible. Second, for humanitarian reasons, we simply have to accept all these refugees with a view of German history, of course, and we are doing, so to speak, some penitency for the German crimes in the past. For humanitarian reason, we can't choose another path, and there is no legal possibility to stop immigration. Therefore, your friendly Germans simply accept immigration, practice a welcoming culture for migrants, and the only party resisting at this point in time was the AfD. Since immigration has had a lot of, collateral damages, to put it mildly, ever more people got convinced that the AfD was that party which from the very beginning had the proper perception or evaluation of what was going on with Germany, and the established parties, in particular the Christian Democratic Party and the supporting Social Democrats and Green parties, would be those who led Germany onto a wrong way, a path downwards. And this established the credibility of AfD as the only alternative to otherwise wrong German policies. And around this migration issue, later came the topic of the energy policies of Germany, getting rid of nuclear energy and relying on wind and solar energy and so on. And so a whole package emerged where the AfD credibly could say, if you want to change Germany's disastrous path into deindustrialization, changing society, no longer possibility to finance our social security system because it's attracting migrants and migrants over years. If you want to have an alternative, really the alternative for Germany is the alternative you should vote for. So the story began 2014, and the catalyzing factor was migration, but now it's even more than migration.
But Werner, you were one of the first, I think it is fair to say, German intellectuals who understood the significance both of the Pegida movement that you described and then also the AfD that emerged from it. I think you were, particularly with Pegida, you were the first German university professor who actually looked at this movement through a scientific lens and tried to figure out what is going on. So I think a lot of credit here goes to you, and I, just also for our viewers and listeners, you always remain my go-to source when it comes to anything pertaining to German politics, and you do many fantastic interviews with the German newspaper Die Welt. The only unfortunate thing is all of them are in German. I mean, that's not a problem for me. It's not a problem, of course, for you, but I think you should do much, much more interviews and many more things in English, because this is really interesting, because there is a famous word that came up after the war in Ukraine, coined by Olaf Scholz, was the so-called Zeitenwende, which I think is now slowly bleeding also into the English language, because it was picked up, the what would be the best translation, the turning of the time, right? The change of the time. And this, of course, was meant that with the war in Ukraine, Germany will now kind of reassert itself, they will rearm, they will become once again, as they were in the 1980s, as Western Germany was in the 1980s, a main pillar of European defense. But it appears that he was correct about the Zeitenwende. I think he just was wrong about what the Zeitenwende is going to be. Now, before we go into some of the more kind of detailed positions of the AfD, because I think that's also important. Many critics say that the AfD has only one issue, which is migration. But as you just explained so eloquently, that no longer seems to be true. They actually have interesting positions. One can agree with them or disagree with them, but they do have positions on many areas, from the economy to migration, of course, also to foreign policy. But maybe tell us a little bit. In about 3 weeks and 3 days, there are federal elections in Germany. Based on what we know today, and today is January 30th, how do you think the AfD, again, this is of course reading tea leaves, so I don't want to put you into a corner, but just if you would share with us your estimation, do you think that the AfD will underperform or overperform the current polls that see them somewhere between 20 and 23%? You don't have to answer that question, only if you want to.
Well, one of our polling institutes does something which they call potential analysis, trying to find out what the possible maximum number of voters for a party would be and the probable minimum numbers. And it seems that the probable maximum numbers for AfD voters throughout Germany seems to be something like 24-25%. Of course, higher in Eastern Germany than in West Germany. So it would be a surprise if the AfD would come far beyond 22% that they have right now. They might even decline depending on whether top politicians of the AfD perform some kind of scandalizing behavior, which they quite oftenly do. But this depends also of the performance of the Christian Democratic Union. See, so many people have not been, to put it mildly, satisfied with the traffic light coalition. Usually under such circumstances, the biggest opposition party, namely the Christian Democratic Union, should have performed quite nicely, should have risen up to something like 40% like in earlier years. It did not do so. They stayed with 31, now they are at 29 with all the ups and downs of the different surveys. They didn't benefit from them. The reason was that many people did not expect any policy change to take place after the Christian Democratic Union would take over the chancellorship. And anybody knows that without a cooperation between the Christian Democratic Union and the AfD, there will be no policy change. So, if the CDU would make credible with our party, there would be a significant policy change in migration policies, energy policies, and so on, then the chances of the AfD to perform quite nicely would decline. So we have to wait whether this victory of the Christian Democratic Union yesterday in the German Bundestag on the migration topic will translate itself into a long-standing hope that the Christian Democrats would bring change to Germany. So my feeling is the AfD will end at a number of something like 22%, the Christian Democratic Union maybe 30, 31 at maximum, and the rest will share the rest of the seats in the Bundestag, and the present-day coalition will be quite minoritarian, in particular the Green Party and the Social Democrats.
I mean, just as a little bit background for our viewers and our listeners. So yesterday, as you mentioned, there was a vote in the German parliament, and I think another one is going to be tomorrow on Friday, where for the first time the Christian Democrats of Friedrich Merz were willing, and it happened, please correct me immediately if I say something wrong here, that they will vote together, or that they would accept votes of the AfD for a proposal that would restrict migration, that would restrict family unification, and there's the so-called Brandmauer, the firewall, as it is called in English, that says that no party of the center is supposed, or even of the center-right, if we want to call the CDU center-right, is supposed to cooperate with the AfD. And there was like a huge ruckus and yelling battles in the German parliament yesterday. Actually, I would argue a quite lively scene of democracy. So there were debates, and there was back and forth, and there was a lot of passion and emotion, because the argument was, okay, now a taboo has been broken. Now all of a sudden the CDU shows willingness to cooperate with the AfD. Now, if I'm not mistaken, like this, even though it appears as a victory for the CDU, now as a twofold question. One is, will these laws also pass the Bundesrat, which is the Senate, if you want, of Germany, kind of where you have the different states of Germany? And the second question is, will it be perceived, particularly for people that could be persuaded to vote for the AfD, will they say, look at this. The CDU is getting serious. Friedrich Merz is getting serious. He's doing a 180 compared to the policies of Angela Merkel, so I can vote for them. Or is it possible that they say, you know what, if the CDU is getting closer to the positions of the AfD, I might vote for the EFD anyways because that's where the future is. And it's of course difficult to say, but for whom was it truly a victory? And do you think that the so-called firewall is really showing cracks, or that this is an over-enthusiastic interpretation by the sympathizers of the AfD?
Those are different questions, and the topic is quite complex, and we need to disentangle it a bit.
All right.
First of all, if the law on migration limits passes the Bundestag on Friday, which is not sure, but which is probable, it will not survive the Bundesrat, the Federal Council, because there those governments are in majority, where either the Social Democrats or the Green Party is part of the government. And if they cannot agree on a certain position, in the coalition agreements, you usually find that they then will abstain from a vote in the Federal Council, and the rules of voting in the Federal Council are so that abstention is counted as a no. So there is no chance for such a migration limitation law to pass the Bundesrat as long as the majorities in the Bundestag created by the land elections in Germany is as they are at present. This can change. Usually it changes in the course of a legislative term.
But that means that everything, sorry to interrupt you, but that means that everything that is currently hailed as a change in migration policy is not true. Because if it doesn't pass the second chamber, it will not become law, so there will be no changes. Or is that a wrong interpretation?
Well, here we would have to go into more details of the German legislative process. There are laws on which the Federal Council has absolute veto powers, and others where the Federal Council has only suspensive veto powers.
Oh, God.
Those second laws can be overruled by the Bundestag by a proper majority. The other ones not. And let's stick it at that. We can this issue as soon as such legislation becomes
Hegelian democracy.
Germany. The second issue is the firewall, or the cordon sanitaire, between the democratic parties and, as they call themselves, and the AfD. Well, firewall, in quotation marks, is perceived by the ones, the leftists, the Green, big part of the Christian Democratic Union, as a protective wall to protect German democracy against the people from the AfD and those positions. Well, and if you look at this issue in this perspective, it's fine to have a firewall, no doubt about that. But if you look at what it really is in political practice, firewall means the following. The people in Germany can vote whatever they want to vote for. They can vote for a right-wing majority in parliaments, and the Bundestag apparently has a right-wing majority. And many state parliaments have right-wing majorities. The people can vote as they want, but the political class make sure that a popular majority, even expressed in a parliamentary majority, is never translated into an effective parliamentary majority, meaning that the Christian Democrats and the AfD would cooperate. Therefore, what is called firewall is some kind of a agreement on the established political parties never to accept policies of the Christian Democratic Union which are not approved by the Social Democrats or by the Green Party.
Which is an odd understanding of democracy, isn't it?
It's a quite odd understanding of democracy, because the guiding idea of representative democracy is that the policy preferences in the population are translated in parliamentary majorities, and in a parliamentary system of government, the composition of the government should reflect the political composition of the parliament. But this has been suspended due to the first meaning of firewall. As soon as you get in touch with the AfD, you open the doors for fascists to overtake the German Republic and to destroy it like they did in 1933. So what we have seen yesterday in the Bundestag is something like, well, the liberation of parliamentary policy making from imperatives which were raised in order to belittle, to dwarf the political position of the Christian Democratic Union. And the funny thing is that the Christian Democratic Union was willing to engage in this mésalliance with the Greens and the Social Democrats because they are so afraid of public opinion, which is quite is very much pro-SPD, pro-Green and anti-AfD, that they preferred not to have political leverage in the Bundestag and German policies in order to avoid criticism by the left-wingers. And if you have seen the quite heated scenes yesterday in the Bundestag, you understand that this fear of Christian Democrat politicians was well founded. But politicians have to show courage, in particular when important decisions are on the agenda. And yesterday we saw a lot of cowardice. Your third question has been, who is going to benefit from this decision? Will the AfD benefit from it or the Christian Democratic Union? Well, this depends on how many of the voters buy the one of the following two arguments. The Christian Democratic Union is going to argue, well, see, we have recognized the mistakes of Angela Merkel's migration policy and other policies as well. Our new party manifesto shows that we are going back to well-proven policy approaches, and this is true, by the way. The new party manifesto is absolutely fine in this respect. And we really try to transform the wrong course of Social Democrat, Green, CDU politics into a new approach. And as soon as we are strong enough, the other parties, the Social Democrats in particular, will follow our lead. Therefore, you have seen yesterday in the Bundestag, we get our project through the parliamentary vote. So if it would be even stronger, one day even the Social Democrats would support us. So please vote for us, and then there is no need to rely on the AfD. The AfD is likely to argue, and it has already started to argue in this way yesterday, is likely to argue, see, maybe the Christian Democrats mean it serious with changing their disastrous course of the last years. But the only way for them to really succeed is to rely on our support. We have seen yesterday they do not like our support, although they see that our support is, simply necessary for them. The only way to teach the Christian Democrats the proper lesson that only side by side with us of the AfD they can change Germany is to increase the strength of the AfD. Therefore, vote for AfD, then you get a better politics. So I guess in the final analysis, the argument of the AfD is the proper one, and the CDU will not find a coalition partner after the next election with which they can really perform not a U-turn in policy making, but significant changes. So after failing negotiations over a coalition agreement, we will have a minority government in Germany. And this minority government is then entitled, even morally entitled, to engage in some cooperation with the AfD as one of the political parties or parliamentary groups which is willing to support changed policies of the German government. But there is still a long way to go, and this long way will be full of, so to speak, victims of the political battles.
One of the criticisms we touched on one is that the AfD supposedly is a quasi-fascist or proto-Nazi party. Another criticism, which I believe has a little bit more merit, is that they are quite soft on Russia, or that they even, at least some members, are actually pro-Russian. What would you make out of that criticism? And I think the same, maybe only if you have time, we can touch a little bit also on the second party that emerged just recently, the Alliance Sarah Wagenknecht, which in some issues is very similar to the AfD, but in others, like in economics, is quite different. But do you think the claim that they are too soft on Russia has merit? And is also, maybe as a follow-up to this, is it something that's important for voters? Like, what do you think from your research and also from your gut feeling, if you may, is the main motivation of those 19 to 22% of people that might cast a vote for the AfD?
A significant motivation of those who are going to vote for the AfD or have voted for the AfD at the last elections is really the feeling that the AfD is a party devoted to maintaining peace in Europe, to avoiding the expansion of the war of Russia against the Ukraine into a war between Russia and NATO. They want to keep Germany out of war, and they feel that, well, doing appeasement with Russia is the proper way to secure peace in Europe. This is a widespread feeling in Germany. It's not only at home in the ranks of possible AfD voters, even many people of the Social Democrats think in exactly this way. The only really no longer pacifist party in Germany is the Green Party, which is funny in itself because they made a 100-degree U-turn when the Russians attacked Ukraine. So for my guts, it's not so believable that the Greens really have changed. They simply took an opportunity to react emotionally to something which is really a disastrous political move, or has been a disastrous political move by the Russian government. In Germany, there is a layer of pro-Russian sentiments, which was not destroyed by the two world wars, which is still there, goes back to the presence of German intellectuals, scientists, nobles, reformers in the state administration of Tsarist Russia. And
sorry to interrupt you, but that truly seems to be a historical constant, that despite two wars, and particularly World War II, which was quite brutally fought and atrocious, that somehow Germans and Russians always found a way back to if you want to call it that, to a constructive relationship, or to stable relations, let's put it this way.
Well, I prefer the term a romantic love story. A romantic love story.
All right.
If, as a German, you are in Russia, which today is no longer possible, spending an evening drinking, talking, without any doubt, you end up in embracing each other, saying, well, Germans and Russians belong together. There's a mutual admiration of the Russian part of German science, culture, and so on, and of the German side, well, the goodwill of Russians after all these atrocious events of the two world wars. So this is a deeper layer, deeply rooted in history, cultural history. Don't forget, we have a long history of Russian exile persons in Germany who fled from Tsarist government, Soviet government, and so on. So there is a certain pro-Russian movement. And nowadays, when communist rule has gone, when Russia is no longer the Soviet Union, but so to speak, Russia proper, all these positive feelings re-emerge. And this is even stronger in East Germany than in West Germany for different reasons. And these pro-Russian feelings go along with anti-American feelings, which have always been strong in West Germany, in particular at the political left, and they have been strong in East Germany and still are strong. And so we see that both on the political left and on the political right, you have a split perception of Russia. Those who say, well, we have to establish good relationships with Russia. This is our historical destiny. Germans and Russians must go hand in hand if there should be order and security in Europe. And the others who say, well, Russian expansionism, Russian imperialism always has been a threat to Europe or to the neighbors of Russia. Therefore, we need to resist. This is a widely shared feeling, and this is best brought to expression in the political positions of the alliance around Sarah Wagenknecht, because they are pacifist, pro-Russian, and at the same time, to switch back to the AfD issue, they are anti-migration, which for many Germans does not go together. Being anti-migration is a right-wing position. Being pro-Russian is a left-wing position, like in Soviet times, but this is no longer true. The public is split on these issues. And as to the AfD, to your question about the programmatic outlook, it is simply wrong to see the AfD as a programmatically fascist, racist party. Any serious analysis of the party programs of the AfD show that there are tremendously big intersections with the former programs of the Christian Democratic Union, starting from family policies to economic policies and so on and so forth.
I want to, because this was the beginning of such a fascinating conversation. I want to go down that rabbit hole a little bit deeper, because you mentioned the historical ties of Germany and Russia. And let's stick a little bit to the historical perspective. What does it mean to be conservative in Germany? Because I think there is, you and I, we both, we travel in Anglo-Saxon circles. Many of our shared colleagues are from the United Kingdom. I'm from the United States. But even now with the victory of Donald Trump and with Elon Musk, an advisor to Trump, supporting the AfD, but I think there is still a key. It's different to be a conservative in continental Europe, and it's even more different to be a conservative, I would argue, in Germany. So how would you describe to an Anglo-Saxon, a stranger, or the listeners to these podcasts who are in the UK or who are in the United States, what does it mean to be conservative in Germany, maybe depending on in which area you feel most comfortable, both historically but also today?
I guess the best starting point is to make a short reference to Anglo-Saxon conservatism, which in its self-understanding means to be anti-liberal. And this is not the case with German or continental European conservatism. In particular in Germany, we have had a close alliance, at least after the Second World War, between liberals and conservatives. And don't forget the old conservatives of Germany, which were the landed gentry in Prussia, those territories which now belong to Poland, where the whole class of the Junkers, the landed gentry, has been destroyed by the socialist reforms. This hardcore of conservatism is no longer in existence. A whole class has been socially dissolved. And the other strong pillar of German conservatism, Protestant, academic, public in metropolitan areas, has widely disappeared due to the Cultural Revolution of 1968 and due to the fact that religion and religious feelings are no longer connected with the conservative side of the right-wing side of the political spectrum, but go along with green and woke and social and leftist positions. So German conservatism is always a feeling that you ought to be liberal when it comes to make a political order which is based on law and order, from a too strict regulation of life to something which you can use with ease in everyday life. Live and let others live, as long as the basic order is guaranteed. And this kind of conservatism engaged into an alliance with traditional family, into an alliance with traditional religion, and has always had a positive attitude towards the state, never, nonetheless, assuming that the state should be the ultimate regulator of political concerns. The state should not say or behave as if the state would be omnipotent, as if the state would have full access to information on how to develop society. So there is an element of economic liberalism, an element of, legal or statist liberalism, and there is an element of openness towards new developments. So this is the basic characteristic of German conservatism. And how does it feel to be a conservative in Germany? Well, it's not a good feeling, because the public expectation is that you should feel ashamed if you confess being a conservative, because in the German public perception, conservatives are people who are backward looking, who are not open, who are not cosmopolitan, who are still in the narrow limits of political thought as expressed in the Imperial Germany, Weimar Republic, which is quite a wrong perception of conservatism in Germany. Maybe I'm a bit partisan in this way because I'm a liberal who happens to be a conservative at the same time, but I do not think that in this feeling I'm alone. But the basic impression in Germany is it's not in order to be a conservative, because you have to embrace new ideas. And as a scientist, I would add the following observation. What makes a conservative is a special relationship with reality. And this special relationship means that reality is out there, and it does not make sense to fight against the functional logic or the correlations, the causalities in reality. Therefore, if something is claimed to be better than established practices or structures, the new has to prove its worth, has to earn its acceptance, and not the old and the established needs to prove that it has been successful, at least in the part. And this goes along with the feeling which is known from the evolutionary process. Evolution is both conservative, things that have proven to be helpful, like the form of our skeleton, which we share with all the vertebrates, is still conveyed from one generation to the next one, but nevertheless evolution is innovative. You react, or evolution reacts always to new opportunities and changes things that are no longer valuable. So conservatism proper is an evolutionary attitude which really likes innovation, but likes innovation with a certain kind of, precaution. New things need to earn their place in the political discourse. And in a political culture which is so woke, so left-green, like it has become in Germany since 1608, or at least since the 70s, such a position, which is not really unintellectual, as I have described it, passes as inacceptable for a proper intellectual. So it is really not easy to be a conservative in the German context.
Do you think, as a concluding question, when the AfD party convention took place a couple of weeks back, I think now, there was this video message from Elon Musk where he said that Germany has to move beyond guilt and they have to find pride again in their history, in their nation, in their culture. And I'm wondering if one of the things that makes the AfD attractive, apart from all their political programs and their political positions, is a sense that they, for better or worse, actually care about Germany in the way a patriot cares about his or her country. There was this quote-unquote scandal when Björn Höcke, who I think is we can justifiably call the leader of the far-right part of the AfD, was saying everything for Germany, alles für Deutschland, which apparently was also a slogan used in Nazi Germany. And I think he was even sentenced to a fine to pay for saying this. So it kind of made some waves in Germany. I'm wondering if there isn't a significant number of people in Germany, but I think even the same, by the way, I would argue is true in Austria, who deep down think that, but actually he's right? What's wrong with saying that as a political party in Germany, you should, that the goal of your politics should be, to better the conditions for Germany. And I recently saw a debate between, I forgot who the gentleman was. The other one was a journalist from Der Spiegel. And she said, well, this sounds dangerously like Germany first. And I think it was a CDU politician who justified it and said, well, I'm a German politician. What exactly do you expect me? But I think this sense that the only party who would credibly put Germany first, again, for better or worse, is the AfD, that this is almost on an emotional level one of the things how they appeal to the people, and a sentiment, I have to be quite frank here, I can understand, at least to some degree.
Well, I fully agree with your observations, and they offer one of the keys to understand why the AfD is so much more successful in East Germany than in West Germany. In East Germany, there was always an unbroken feeling, an unshattered feeling that being a German is nothing bad in itself. The East Germans even felt to be superior to other East Germans due to German virtues and so on, be this wrong or not, but the feeling was always there, it's not bad. It's no shameful thing to be a German. And this is quite different in West Germany, not for ordinary people usually, but for intellectuals, for academic trained people, and for those who are active in the cultural life. There it really became fashionable to suffer from being a German. And this feeling went so far that our vice-chancellor, in a book which he has written as a top politician, confessed, well, I never had the feeling that Germany could be something important for me. And another outstanding Green politician, a woman, by the way, was running in a demonstration behind a sign saying, well, Germany, you are really a piece of shit.
Aha.
And this is really a feeling which is shared among so many leftists in Germany. And to those, the clear alternative position is taken by the AfD. The Christian Democrats are wavering between both poles, having bad conscience when they show that there might be Germans. There is a famous scene after one of the long ago past victories of the Christian Democratic Union at a federal election. One of the top politicians took a flag, black, red, and gold, a German flag, not the Nazi flag, by the way, but the flag of the German revolutions of 1948 and 1918. And the Chancellor Merkel saw him, took the flag out of his hands, and put it away. Imagine this happening at an American political rally.
Yeah.
Conceivable, or in France. So when Höcke, who is not the brightest person in my evaluation, showed up in public television for the first time, he had a little German flag from the, I guess, soccer European Championship, and he put it on the seat he was on, and asked why he would do that. He replied, well, he wants to demonstrate that he's a proud German. So in the German public perception, it became clear, proud Germans are the people from the AfD. Reflected Germans are those like Vice Chancellor Habeck or other Green politicians who have a problem with Germany. And if you want to be on the good side, on the side of those guys who reflect about history, try to draw lessons from history, you have to oppose the AfD, because the AfD apparently stands in the tradition, in the unbroken tradition of German nationalism, going back to Imperial Germany and culminating, as many think, in the Nazi regime, which, by the way, is not true. German nationality was at its lowest point during the Nazi period and not at its best.
Yeah, this is why you had an Austrian chancellor during that time and not a German one.
Well, this we might discuss, but we leave that out. We are too much friends, we Germans and you Austrians, to discuss this issue.
Well, we're out of time, but Werner, can I maybe put you on the spot? Would you agree? So I can witness this in our audience. Would you come on again after the federal elections in 3 weeks? I think this was a much better. I had high expectations, but you surpassed them with flying colors, and I think our viewers and listeners enjoyed. And we have to redo this after the elections to do kind of a debriefing for our audience about what then actually happened in Germany. Where we maybe went wrong or where we were surprised, if they did, who did overperform, who did underperform. I think it would be really, really interesting, especially this broad, also historical perspective that you offer. So I hope you would be willing to come on again.
Yes, I'm willing. I'm looking forward to that. It's always a pleasure talking with you, Ralph.
On that note, thank you so much, Werner, and thank you to all our listeners. Please stay tuned for other forthcoming episodes and for the next episode with Werner.